Contrary to popular belief, playing video games years after their initial release can be a whole unique experience in itself. You get to experience the game after patches and better, more affordable hardware can run them without issue. You get to enjoy bits that players couldn't enjoy at release because of the inevitable day one bugs. But most importantly, you get to experience just what these older games did to contribute to their successors. Playing Crysis 2 in 2019 is a very interesting experience, because for years I had been scared away by this infamous trilogy, because apparently they exist only for those in the super hardcore PC gaming community to push the power of their computers to the limit. Because of this, I never got to see or understand if they really carried any weight by themselves as games, and not just as benchmarking tools. That is, of course, until I played Crysis 2 in 2019. I can admit that my early impressions of this game were not the greatest. The best way I can begin to describe Crysis 2's early hours is to call it futuristic Call of Duty before futuristic Call of Duty was a thing. All the typical elements of a military shooter are there, from linearity to scripted cutscenes, to angry military men screaming angry military things.
You heard her, bitch!
But once you get past those early stages and you overcome the Seinfeld effect, the game starts to really pick up and throws in a surprisingly fun experience at you. But of course I'm getting a little ahead of myself, so let's go ahead and cover the basics. In Crysis 2, you play as Alcatraz, a marine sent in with an entire squad to defend the city of New York. A surprise attack on your submarine wipes out your entire team, and before you realize it, you are wearing a powered armor thanks to Prophet, a character from the first game. And it is from here that you go on to a big adventure, fighting angry military men and alien invaders, and a surprisingly amount of variety for gameplay in a military shooter. As I mentioned earlier, the core gameplay is your typical by-the-numbers military shooter. Just point and click at enemies until they die, walk to the next objective marker, watch a scripted cutscenes or whatever set piece the game wants you to do, then rinse and repeat. But what spices it up is the things that you get to do with your power suit. You can go from tanking damage in armor mode, or in case the battle gets a little too overwhelming even with your armor, you can start ghosting entire areas in the cloak mode. This is probably my favorite aspect of the game, because I am a big sucker for stealth. And while the stealth system in this game is very basic and very bare bones if you ask me, it still let me have some real tense moments that I look forward to in all of my stealth games. Because the cloak mode has a very limited timer, you have to move constantly from cover to cover to let it recharge. You can even clear out enemies silently with takedowns, but doing those disables your cloak for a second, which can get you detected if you do it at the wrong time. That is on top of having all of the enemies immediately home in of you if you run out of cloak and you get detected. Which is of course always unfortunate. Sometimes, however, the ghosting feels a lot better than the alternatives. Aliens and soldiers can and will overwhelm you if you are not careful, especially on normal or higher difficulties, and sometimes you might be stuck fighting infinitely respawning enemies until you have to move to the next objective marker because they will simply not stop. Which leads to some unintentionally hilarious moments because, thanks to the power of the CryEngine, you might be left with a nice pile of corpses that will simply not despawn. Now, while the average gameplay loop of this game was fun enough to keep me entertained for the entirety of the campaign, along with the usual set pieces that are honestly not worth mentioning because, you know, typical chase sequences where you blast everyone at high speed and you are almost invincible, the game still carries some minor setbacks. For instance, as you fight more and more of the aliens, you can come across some mini-bosses and sometimes you can have straight-up boss fights, which wouldn't be too bad in itself if it wasn't for the fact that they are complete bullet sponges. There is honestly not much fun to be had when the bigger enemies can eat bullets, grenades and rocket launchers like they are candy, while they can easily disable your suit and kill you at the first chance they get. Made even worse when you, more often than not, have these bigger guys being supported by smaller guys. And those can actually harass you while you're trying to reload or regenerate your health as you're about to die. Thankfully though, these encounters are rather rare. They only happen here and there, and that is honestly a lot more than what I could say about the story. Because while the story is far from terrible, I mean, it is your typical convoluted military alien invasion plot, it still makes the unfortunate mistake of making Alcatraz a silent protagonist. While I understand that the main reason for this is so players can get immersed and put themselves into Alcatraz's shoes, his silence only makes some of the more emotional cutscenes rather awkward, because he doesn't reply or really react to anything happening around him, or even if NPCs are talking to him.
Jesus, I can't do this anymore. I'm not some Spec Ops hard man like you, like Prophet was.
Despite all of those problems, I still had fun with Crysis 2 overall. I don't have any problems with it being a more linear military shooter, or that it utilizes every action cliché in the book, or even if its story is nonsensical slog. It lets me kill things and run wild with the mechanics it offers, and that is honestly good enough for me. Although not good enough to make me want to try out Crysis 1 or Crysis 3. Playing this game now, however, does give a good perspective on why Crytek went through hard times. While the visuals of this game are really a thing to behold, it is still not enough substance to warrant buying a powerful PC just to run this one game, at least not in my humble little opinion. If anything, I find it more commendable to studios that have games with fantastic visuals that can still run and look great no matter the setup, because the game itself is just that well optimized. Regardless, I still feel I got my money's worth with this game, and for that very reason I am giving Crysis 2 a very passable but very solid 7 out of 10. It is a nice testament to one really grim reality. It is better to put out a great game that anybody can run, than to go bankrupt scaring people away because your game is just too powerful and demanding.